All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Reynolds. I am a Community Sustainability Coordinator with the Office of Sustainability and Innovations here at Ann Arbor. And I would like to welcome you to our fourth A2ZERO Sustainability Series seminar of 2022. Tonight, we are going to be talking about air quality monitoring. So just to let everyone know, this is being recorded and we are going to have it up on our YouTube page after the fact, so you can watch it then if you don't have time to watch all of it tonight. Or if you weren't here at all and you're watching the recording now, then welcome to you as well. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the structure for the evening before we get going and talk a little bit about next month's event also. So next month on May 25th, we will be holding the final A2ZERO Sustainability Series for 2022. That one is going to be titled A2ZERO and Me, and it will be about A2ZERO, the plan. We'll be talking about how you can get involved. We'll be talking about A2ZERO Week. That is the celebration of the second anniversary of the passing of the A2ZERO plan that was passed in June 2020. So in early June, we'll be having our second annual A2ZERO Week. So we'll be talking about that at next month's event. And talking about some volunteer opportunities as well. So if you're interested in learning more about how you can get involved, then please come to that event. But for now, we're going to be talking about air quality monitoring tonight. So we have a few different speakers here joining us tonight. We have Erica Wolf from EGLE, and then we have Katie Grantham from SEMCOG. And then I will be speaking later on tonight as well. So first we're going to be hearing from Erica, who's going to be talking about ambient air, what it is, why it's important, why we need to monitor it, and how EGLE is monitoring it across Michigan. Then we'll have a talk from Katie about air quality regulations and monitoring at the more regional level. So here in Southeast Michigan, some of the communities around here, what they're doing, and how you can get involved at the regional level. Then we'll have a little bit of a break, so you can go to the bathroom or grab a drink or a bite to eat. We'll come back after about 5 minutes or so, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here in Ann Arbor as far as air quality monitoring. We have some air quality monitoring that we're going to get started here shortly. We're really just getting into it, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then after that, we will open up for a Q&A session. Everyone, you should have access to the Q&A feature down on the bottom of your screen, so you can put in questions there. I believe you also have the ability to raise your hand, and then we should be able to allow you to speak, and you can ask your question in person. So Thea is joining me from the Office of Sustainability as well, and she will be helping to monitor the questions and stuff like that at the end. So thanks, Thea, for being here. Without further ado, I think I will kick it over to Erica to start us off. If you want to go ahead and start sharing your screen, and while you do that, I will give a little bit of an introduction to you. Okay. So Erica is the Quality Assurance Manager for EGLE's Air Quality Division in the air monitoring section. She started in AQD, the Air Quality Division, 19 years ago as a technician running ambient air monitoring equipment in the Southeast Michigan area. Erica then spent 8 years working on statewide air planning projects and recently moved back to air monitoring work. She grew up in Novi and received her Bachelor of Science degree from Oakland University and her Juris Doctorate degree from Thomas M. Cooley Law School. So with that, I will kick it off to you, Erica.
It says that the host disabled participant screen sharing. So.
Right. I will need to make you both a co-host as well. Sorry about that.
Okay. Let's see where. This is much more different than. Okay, let's just try this. Okay.
Looks good.
So I am going to talk about ambient air in throughout Michigan. And like Sean said, I'm in the air quality division, the air monitoring section, and we monitor the ambient air. So today, I have a couple higher level things to go through: why we monitor the ambient air, what we monitor, and potential health effects of those pollutants, where and how we monitor those pollutants, and where you can find results about air monitoring. So first, why we monitor the ambient air. Let's take a step back and what actually is ambient air. I mean, ambient air is basically measuring air that is available to the general public, measuring pollutants in that air. And that air that is available to the general public is defined as air that is in neighborhoods, schools, parks, and outside of industry boundaries. So if you can think of like a factory and there's a fence line around the factory, we don't monitor the air inside that fence line, but anything outside is considered what the general public would breathe. So that's what we monitor. And why we monitor it? Well, basically, we want data. We like data. We're data people. And that data helps us to make sure what types of levels pollutants we're getting from those pollutants throughout the ambient environment, either within a city, a region, a state, or the entire country. It can be extrapolated for those purposes. One of the other main reasons is to comply with regulations. The US EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has a whole slew of regulations that we have to comply with, and especially with ambient air pollutants. And we monitor to make sure we are in compliance with those. And in addition, to make sure we are meeting the national ambient air quality standards for certain criteria pollutants, which I'll explain what those are in a minute. So we monitor two types of pollutants. The first are the criteria pollutants. Those are the 7 that are listed on the screen here: carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, lead, particulate matter 10 microns or less, or PM10, and particulate matter 2.5 microns or less, or PM2.5. Now, explain what microns is and what that is a little later. And we also, in addition to these criteria pollutants, and these are the ones that EPA creates standards for, and I'll again explain that later. There's a lot of explaining later when it comes to ambient air. It's not a very simple concept, but so we have our criteria pollutants we monitor for, and we also monitor for air toxics and other parameters. The air toxics, some of them contribute to criteria pollutants like VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. And we have carbonyls and polyaromatic hydrocarbons. These are more toxics related compounds. Like polyaromatic hydrocarbons, think of like if you're char broiling something, that's the char, is the polyaromatic hydrocarbons. Metals, again, we all know that certain metals can be bad for you, so we monitor those throughout the air. PM2.5 speciation. Now, PM2.5 is a certain type of pollutant that it can be formed as PM2.5, or it can be formed in the atmosphere. And so we like to measure what composes the PM2.5, because that helps determine where the pollution could be coming from in the area. And that's why we do the speciation for it. Carbon black and diesel particulate matter, that is, car, truck traffic, basics of that. And then meteorological data, because it doesn't really do us any good to figure out what the pollutants are if we don't know where they're coming from. And we need that meteorological data to help us do that. Some differences between the criteria pollutants and the air toxics that we measure. EPA creates standards that are health protective for the criteria pollutants, and those are the 7 pollutants that were, if I can magically go back here, no, that's forward. These are these pollutants right here. EPA creates standards that are based on health studies, based on what is most healthy for the sensitive populations throughout the country. And we monitor those based on those health protective standards. If the standards are met, the area is considered in attainment for those standards. If the standards are not met, the area is considered not in attainment for those standards or pollutants. Now, it's something to note if you're actually going to look at air monitoring data is having one or even two readings that are above the levels the EPA says are protective does not mean that an area is not in attainment with those standards. It just means that we had a couple high readings. And I'm going to skip ahead to show you, this is a reference slide, and I don't know, Sean, if people have access to this afterwards, like the slide deck themselves.
Yep, I'll be sending out the slide decks to everyone.
Perfect. So this is just a reference slide to show you how complex the standards are. The middle column shows you that really if you go over, if one reading is over the standard, you're not quote unquote over the standard, because a standard is more than one reading. Like for instance, the top one, carbon monoxide, it's an 8-hour average, not to be exceeded more than once per year. So an 8-hour average means obviously 8 hours of data, not just 1 hour over the standard. So more than one reading contributes to a standard. Let me scoot back to talking about the difference between criteria pollutants and air toxics. So I covered that meeting or not meeting the standard is not usually based on one measurement. So over to air toxics. Now these monitoring details are not as prescriptive as the criteria pollutants. EPA doesn't come out with like, this is a health-based standard that you must meet for these. Instead, they are health-based, but they are more exposure limits. They're not as heavily regulated by EPA based on what we're measuring and what we're not measuring. There's no non-attainment or attainment for certain air toxics. And currently, they're also not funded as heavily as monitoring for the criteria pollutants because there isn't that regulatory driver for them, unless they're part of these couple programs here that I did not write out for some reason. It's the NATS is the National Ambient National Air Toxics Trends Site, and PAMS is the Photochemical Assessment Monitoring Stations. Okay, so here's our reference slide, and then going on to, I wanted to just talk about health effects of ozone and particulate pollutants. These are, again, criteria pollutants. We have in the Southeast Michigan region in Ann Arbor, non-attainment for ozone right now. US EPA is reconsidering the particulate PM 2.5 standards. So we're going to be assessing that, or the royal we are going to be assessing that over the next couple of years. So I thought these would be good ones to look at health-based wise and trend-wise for the Ann Arbor area. Again, there are two different types of ozone. We have stratospheric ozone, and this is ozone in the upper atmosphere. This ozone protects the population from harmful UV radiation. We want ozone in the upper atmosphere to a certain level. What we don't want is ozone at ground level, and that is what we measure in our ambient air monitors. And this is what can cause health issues. And these health issues in general are increased coughing, sore, scratchy throats, pain with deep breathing, kind of you can't catch a breath, like you've been running and just can't catch your breath, fatigue. These symptoms will come on rapidly, but they'll also decrease fairly rapidly if you're out of the environment that caused them to begin with. They're very much like asthma symptoms, and what's important is they can also trigger asthma attacks and other lung issues for people. The way ozone works, now this is where we're getting a little sciencey on everybody, it's inflammation based. So this is a little schematic of lungs. Can you see my mouse? Okay, perfect. So here we have our blood vessel going through the lung tissue, have lung cells lined with little cilia, and then kind of fluid surrounding that. And then here's the atmosphere that you're breathing in. So you breathe in ozone, it goes in and causes inflammatory cells to be produced and pop out and replace some of these healthy lung tissue, which they don't have the cilia on them. Over time, there's a potential issue and studies that are concerned with the replacing of those cells without, my toxicologist gave me some good language here and I'm butchering it. So I am going to go back to my notes. And structural changes. They're concerned with permanent structural changes that can result in lung growth damage for children and reduced quality of life for everyone. So ozone is has inflammatory properties that can really cause health issues to people at high enough levels, which is why it is a criteria pollutant that EPA regulates and we monitor. Next one that I want to cover is particulate pollution. Now, as I said, there were two different types of particulate pollution, and it comes from many different sources. It's not all just dust, but some of it can be formed in the atmosphere. This schematic kind of helps demonstrate what those micron levels are again. So we have, this is a human hair schematic, and it's 50, this one is 50 microns in diameter. Now, PM10 microns or less is this little blue dot here. So 5 of these make up 1 diameter of a hair, and that's what PM10 is that people could be breathing in. If you go even smaller than that, to the little red dots, that is PM 2.5. And the PM 2.5 is the one that I'll be talking about in a little bit with some actual readings from our monitors. And what particulate matter can do is it can deposit in the upper respiratory tract, and if it gets small enough, you can inhale it into your lungs. And some of the smallest particulate matter, there's concern that it can actually get in your bloodstream. The effects of particulate matter, they're very similar to ozone: coughing, inflammation. It can cause asthma attacks, bronchitis. There's studies linking it to premature death and heart disease and heart effects. So I'm going to shift gears to talk about how and where we monitor the air now. Again, at a more high level, these are some pictures of some of our monitors. This is a bunker, which we use to contain our more sensitive instruments and our data loggers that collect all the data from the monitors. And on the other side, this is a standalone particulate matter monitor. This is a picture of our Dearborn site, I believe. And this one has, you'll see 2 particulate monitors here. Here is a metals monitor here, and there's another one in the corner. And then this is a picture of the inside of the bunker with some gaseous monitors. We also have a lot of other monitors here. These are just kind of the general high-level ones. And we have a lot that we monitor continuously. And those are ozone, NO2, SO2, CO, particulate, and carbon black. And then the other ones we'll either monitor every 3 days, every 6 days, or based on specific project schedules. This is a slide showing all of, yeah, David? Somebody raised their hand.
Yep, let me see if I can let them speak. There we go. I think you should be able to unmute and speak now, David.
Yeah, okay. I wonder, is it 24-hour data stream, or are you monitoring at certain times of the day?
It's a 24-hour data stream. Yeah, give me 1 second and I will get you to a slide with some more information on that. Okay?
Okay, cool.
So this is all of our air monitors throughout the state. We have 1 tribal one in Manistee and a lot in Wayne County. On the EGLE website, we do have an interactive map that they just revamped our website, so I do apologize. Yes, we have an interactive map that shows every monitor throughout the state. If you click on it, get this splash screen. Just click OK. There's a how to use the map on the side.
Erica, we're still seeing your slides. I think you'll need to reshare to show the website.
You are sharing screen. Okay. New share. Okay. Does this work now? Are you seeing a map?
Yep.
Okay. So all our air monitoring sites, the tribal one is in orange on this site. These are our non-attainment areas, and I'm going to zoom in. Ann Arbor, the closest one, is in Ypsilanti. And if you click on the dot, it shows you where it is. You can get more information on the monitoring site, some photos of it, the hourly data from that site, and it shows you what parameters are measured at each site. If there's a yes, we measure it. If there's a no, we don't measure it. It doesn't mean that we've turned off measuring. It just means we don't have an instrument to measure it at that site. And so I'm just going to go to the hourly monitoring. And hopefully that works, but it doesn't seem to be working. Anyhow, you can click on it and see hourly data. I'm going to go back and re-share PowerPoint. So on the website, even though it looks different right now, it has the same basic information. You can get to information on our air quality forecast. You can contact people for information or get our air year-end reports that has all of the data you would ever want. You can get signed up to get information on real-time information, or get notified in your email if there are high levels throughout the year or for each day. When you click on the site that shows the real-time data, you'll get something that looks like this. It'll show you this AQI is Air Quality Index. This is a US EPA designed site. And this one was from last week, and it shows there was moderately high particulate matter 2.5 in the Detroit area. Ozone was very low. Everything else looked green. Up here, air quality notification is where you would go to sign up to get notified of particular air events, and you can pick which area of the country you want to get notified for and how you want to be notified, via email or text, or I think they do text now, but definitely email. I wanted to go through quickly just some long-term trends. This is a 20-year lookout. It doesn't look that impressive. If you go back like 50 years, you really see a drop-off because the pollution was fairly high before EPA started their standards, and we had monitoring before then. So you'll see this black line is EPA's standard for ozone. And I picked Ypsilanti because it's the closest monitor to Ann Arbor, and Oak Park because it's the closest downwind monitor that has both ozone and PM to compare. So you'll see that both of these monitors used to be above the standard. Then they trended lower, and then the standard lowered, and the standard lowered again, and they're both below the standard. And this is the fourth highest ozone result, and that goes into calculating the design, or to calculate whether or not we're meeting the standard. And here is the actual level that would be used to meet the standard, and showing how it has gone down over the 20-year period. And for PM 2.5, same thing. Here is the standard, and the levels way below the standard in this area. I'm going to stop sharing and try to find a way to share that website with you guys, but yeah, other than that, when I will give it back to Sean, and he can do some filler, give it over to Katie, or what he wants to do.
Great, thanks, Erica. We do have one question in the chat that I'll go ahead and give to you before we pass off to Katie. That's just, why is there no monitoring from EGLE in Ann Arbor?
So our monitoring is based off of mostly population requirements handed down by EPA, and also industry in the area. And you don't have a lot of population compared to where we need to have monitors. Ideally, it would be great to have monitors in every single city throughout the state, but they're rather expensive and heavily manpower intensive. So we just can't do it. But I think Sean's going to talk a little bit later about some of the ways to bridge that gap a little bit.
Yep, I'll be talking, if you stick around, I'll be talking about the city of Ann Arbor's efforts to monitor air quality here in the city on our own. So stay tuned for that. But for now, I think I will pass it over to Katie if you want to go ahead and start sharing your screen, and I will go ahead and give your introduction. So Katie is a planner in SEMCOG's Environment and Infrastructure Group. SEMCOG stands for the Southeastern Michigan Coalition of Governments. Is that correct, Katie?
Council of Governments, but
Council
it was super close. It's basically the same.
Cool. So she's a planner in SEMCOG's Environment and Infrastructure Group, primarily focusing on watershed planning and education, air quality, and solid waste activities across the region. She helps to lead SEMCOG's coastal and climate resiliency initiatives and Southeast Michigan's air quality study group. Katie received her bachelor's degree in environmental biology from Michigan State University and her master's degree in environment and sustainability from the University of Michigan. When she's not working, you can find her kayaking and hiking all over Michigan. So with that, I will pass it off to you, Katie.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And thanks everybody for having me today. I'm always excited to talk about water and air quality. It's one or the other. So I'm always switch my brain between the two, but it keeps everything pretty interesting. So I'm excited to kind of dive into some of our regional air quality work and talking about some of the programs that we have across the region that are looking at air quality and helping to improve air quality overall. And here's my contact information if you have any questions later on. Let's go ahead. Okay, to the next one. So before I start talking about our air quality work, some of you might be like, what is SEMCOG? What does that mean? What do you do? So I just wanted to get into a little bit of what our agency does for those that are less familiar. So we're the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, and we support coordinated local planning efforts with things like technical data, intergovernmental resources, and we have about 170 units of local government, community colleges, and intermediate school districts that are members of ours. And really, ultimately, SEMCOG's plans function to improve the quality of the region's environmental resources, make the transportation system safer and more efficient, revitalize communities, and encourage economic development. And so I work in our environment and infrastructure group. So like I said earlier, I work on everything from air quality to solid waste planning and management to water resource education and coastal and climate resilience. So I cover a wide range of topics with our team, and air quality is one of the things that we work on, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about it today. So it's really important that local governments, businesses, and the general public do what they can to voluntarily lower pollutant emissions in order to improve the health and safety across the region. And the good news is, and you've already seen it today, you're going to see it later, there's a lot of organizations across the state of Michigan that are working to improve air quality and regulate air quality pollutants for the future of the region. And so you just heard from Erica with EGLE and talking about air quality monitoring and really ensuring that the state of Michigan is in compliance with the Federal Clean Air Act. And in addition to this, there's a lot, that the regions can do and even local governments can do, as Sean's going to talk about later, to improve air quality at a local level, to really ensure that we're, that we have good air quality and that we're protecting public health. So Erica already talked a lot about ozone and the National Ambient Air Quality Standards in her presentation, so I'm not going to dive too much into it. She did a great job. But really, we have these National Ambient Air Quality Standards that we set through the Clean Air Act for pollutants that are considered harmful to public health and to the environment. And so while we monitor all of the pollutants that she showed in her list, I'm really going to focus on ozone for the primary focus of my talk today, because it's a pollutant that we're still working to regulate, especially in urban environments, and it can have a large impact on human health. And so you might be asking, how does ozone form and how does it affect us? And so what Erica showed in some of those non-criteria pollutants, nitrous oxides, otherwise known as NOx, and volatile organic compounds, otherwise known as VOCs, are emissions released from several sources like motor vehicle exhaust, electric utilities, industries, and some chemical solvents. And so on really hot sunny days, these compounds react with sunlight to form ozone. And high concentrations of ground level ozone can impact sensitive groups like the elderly and children and folks with asthma or pre-existing conditions. And so it's really important for us to address ozone, especially if we have things like an ozone action day, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So Erica showed a graph of what things look like over the last 20 years, and I've got one that shows, how things have been reduced since 25 years. So it's not a huge difference, but you can see that overall, really our concentrations and for these air monitored design values over time have decreased. And so, when we're talking about things like pollution and climate change and all of that, I think it's really important to focus on, the positives that we've seen over the last 10 to 20 years. And this just shows that we've made a lot of progress in making our air cleaner. And so I think that's, really important to highlight. EPA, the state of Michigan, all of these different organizations have really made a huge impact so that we can protect the health and safety, even if there's still a long way to go. So I just like to highlight that. And we can also see that here for PM 2.5, which Erica talked about, so I won't go into it too much. But the good thing that I like to highlight in this slide is that it's really important for us to address the progress that we're making, like I said. And this graph comes from the EPA. And so as we can see, since the 1990s, we've had things like significant growth in gross domestic products, in vehicle miles traveled, and in our population, and yet we're still seeing while we're still seeing some, increases in pollutants, we're also seeing decreases in aggregate emissions and those 6 criteria pollutants that we've talked about throughout today. And so we're still working to address air pollution throughout Michigan, but, we can see that we've made a lot of progress over the years. And I think even as we think about things like the pandemic and how that's impacted, people working from home and how we're moving about and, our needs for public transportation, the hope is that this can continue to be a growing trend into the future. So Erica mentioned attainment and non-attainment for ozone standards. And so I just wanted to get into that a little bit more since it can be really confusing. But currently, Michigan is designated non-attainment for ozone, which means that we do not meet the EPA ozone standard of 70 parts per billion. And this standard was lowered from 75 parts per billion to 70 parts per billion in 2015. And so, given this designation, the state has been working to develop a state implementation plan, which really kind of targets areas where we can reduce emissions and reduce the impacts of ozone. But the good news is, and a lot is happening even on this day today, is that over the past 3 years, we've been in non-attainment, but we've been tracking our ozone levels, and we have met the standard using data from the last 3 years. And so actually right now there is a public comment open for ozone to be redesignated as attainment within our region. And so that actually closes today. So I'm sure we'll be getting a little bit more word about that moving into the future. And we do consider this good for our region because it basically, if we don't meet the standards, there's a lot of different things that have to be done, including implementing vehicle emissions testing programs. And while this can be a really great thing because we don't want, to have these air quality emissions impacting vulnerable populations, a lot of studies have found that these vehicle emissions testing programs actually disproportionately impact minority communities, since a lot of, and so, it's a win for that. And it also allows us to kind of redirect our attention to, initiatives like Sean's going to be talking about later, where, maybe we can do a better job at tracking and monitoring at a regional level to make sure that, local governments are equipped to help their residents, monitor pollutants and how to keep them safe. We might be, seeing an ozone action day or whether, particulate matter might be high one day. So lots of news coming from this, and we'll kind of continue to keep you updated, but I just wanted to give you a little snippet into that world. So now I'm going to talk about SEMCOG's air quality work. And there's a lot of different programs that are kind of high level at reducing emissions, but there's a lot of programs that we have that you can participate in to kind of do your part. So I just wanted to share, both sides of the spectrum. So one of the things that we're currently working on, which I'm really excited about, is these looking at heat vulnerability and looking at equity as it relates to air quality. So, while we're talking about air quality has improved across the United States, millions still live in communities where air pollution exceeds the EPA standards that protect public health. And residents in these communities often bear a disproportionate share of the environmental and health impacts of emissions from industry, oil and gas operations, nearby highways, railroads, or ports, and other sources of air pollution. And even we see a lot of that within Detroit, where so many of those industries still exist, and where communities downriver have some of the highest rates of asthma in the country. So, this is something that we're really interested in focusing on, and looking at, air pollution on a smaller scale. So one of the ways that we're doing that is we're currently mapping populations that are vulnerable to extreme heat events. And while this is looking at, extreme heat days, we also have to take into consideration that when we have those extreme heat days, there's also a good chance that we might have ozone action days. And so we can kind of pair these two things together to figure out, are there areas that we can put in cooling centers? Are there ways that we can notify these populations or provide them with masks or something where they might be able to reduce the impacts of ozone or PM concentrations on that day. And we also have this equity emphasis areas tool on our website, which is helping us better get a sense of where there are vulnerabilities within the populations within Southeast Michigan that might be subject to environmental degradation, and how can we make a difference there. So this is new work. This is something we're diving into, but I just wanted to mention it because I'm very excited about it, and maybe you will be too. The next thing I want to talk about is pretty dense, so I'm going to skim over it, but we do have what's called the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. And so this, otherwise known as the RTP, is really a long-range blueprint of the region's transportation system. And usually RTPs are conducted every 4 years and maintain a 20-year horizon into the future. And so we recently adopted the 2045 RTP, and we're currently working on the 2050. And so, this describes a lot of the road projects that are happening throughout the region. And, it really focuses on improving the transportation system and congestion within the region, which in turn improves air quality. And so part of our role as a transportation agency is really to ensure that all of the road projects proposed through our region maintain air quality conformity requirements, which basically means that we maintain overall compliance with those national ambient air quality standards that we talked about earlier. We also have something called a Transportation Improvement Program, otherwise known as a TIP. So many acronyms, I don't even remember them all the time, so you don't have to either, but I'm just gonna list them just in case. So this is really a short range plan that lists all the transportation projects in the region that seek federal transportation funding with a 4-year horizon. And so, there's a lot of investment in between these two plans. We can really make sure that these projects are working to maintain emissions and coordinate even more, because maybe there's ways that we can improve congestion, stop idling, and help reduce air quality in that way. One of the things that I work on within our region is known as CMAX, again, more acronyms, but it's the Southeast Michigan Air Quality Study. And so this is a great group that brings together stakeholders from both industry and government, as well as scientists, to really work collaboratively in developing cost-effective strategies for achieving the national air quality standards within our region. And so this group was actually created in the early 90s under the name of the Southeast Michigan Ozone Study. And initially it was really focused on attaining the 120 parts per billion 1-hour ozone standard. And since that time, the group has really tackled subsequent revisions to the ozone standards, as well as recommended attainment strategies for fine particulate matter and sulfur dioxide. And so today we really unite this group. We've been working on the SIP over the past few years. There's a lot of great folks at EGLE that have been doing these really amazing studies to look at, where some of these different emissions or where some of the things that we might be missing across the region. If there's a gas leak, can we use, like remote sensing data to be able to detect that. And so there's a lot happening at that level, a lot of these great studies, and working with scientists across the region to make sure that we're all able to work together on attaining these standards. The last kind of technical thing I'm going to talk about is the CMAQ funding. So again, air quality is really important to our operations as we balance our need to move around our region with also being good stewards of our environment. And so a major way that we can reduce ozone from surface transportation and still work with our goal of keeping the system moving is really managing congestion. And so as the Metropolitan Planning Organization for urbanized areas, we're responsible for transportation planning duties for the region. And so one of the things that we do is we annually award upwards of about $15 million for local projects in urbanized areas to help control congestion and fund projects that really help improve the impacts of air quality. And we've also been looking at how we can reduce CO2 through these projects now, which is important if communities are looking at things like climate action planning. So there's a lot of funding for these different projects. We've awarded a lot of great projects throughout the region. And so, we monitor project results with performance measures from the Federal Highway Administration, including things like particulate matter levels, reliability, excessive delays. And so while this is a technical transportation program, it does have that connection to air quality. And it gives local governments who might not have been able to implement a program like this a chance to be able to get funding to improve congestion and hopefully improve air quality within their region. Okay, so now that I've talked about all of these different programs that we SEMCOG works on, I wanted to talk about some of the different regional programs that we have that you can participate in to kind of do your part in helping to improve air quality, or at least just making you more aware of it. So one of our biggest voluntary programs is the Ozone Action Program. You might have heard this term. Ozone Action Programs are pretty common across our country. And in fact, the state has what's called the Clean Air Action Program. So not just focused on ozone, focusing on all of those different criteria pollutants and how they impact human health. And so SEMCOG's Ozone Action Program has been running for 28 years now. And as a whole, the program has really helped make a difference in air quality education throughout the region. So this program helps residents throughout Southeast Michigan take action on Ozone Action Days and really every day of the year. So Ozone Action Days are called when conditions are right for high potential ozone formation. And really by letting the region know it's an Ozone Action Day, citizens can take action into their own hands to keep air quality clean in Southeast Michigan. And so on an Ozone Action Day, you might hear some of these messages, and these are things that you can do at your own house to help reduce the impacts of ozone on that day. So these are things like delaying mowing your lawn until the evening, or maybe just holding off and not mowing it that day at all. You can walk, bike, carpool, or use public transportation if that's an option to you. One thing you can do is also avoid refueling during daylight hours, and also avoid things like idling as you're driving along facilities. So just a few things that you can think about. And really this just helps to make sure that we're not releasing more VOCs or volatile organic compounds into our environment, so we can reduce the chances of ozone formation in our atmosphere. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is our Commuter Connect program, which provides a one-stop trip planning and commuter matching service for residents to improve their commute. So really by entering an origin and a destination, users can find available transportation options, whether that be carpool, whether that be vanpool, walking, biking, or taking public transit. And so in addition to being a useful trip planning tool. Commuter Connect really helps the region to meet air quality goals by reducing air pollution and congestion. And so, you know, you can see things like van pooling. You can even find if you're going somewhere and maybe someone else is going to the same place or they work nearby, that's a way to connect with them and be able to schedule those carpool rides. And it's also really good because it shows you all of the different public transit options within your area if that's something that you're interested in. So lots going on when it comes to that. And I really encourage you guys to both keep an eye out for Ozone Action Days as well as, you know, keep a lookout or go ahead and try Commuter Connect. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is an upcoming program that we're working on right now that we actually just kicked off last week. So SEMCOG will be working with public sector consultants and EGLE, which is Local Governments for Sustainability, to conduct a regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory. I know this has already been done in the city of Ann Arbor, and I think you guys actually did use the EGLE Clear Path tool when doing this work. And that was part of your A2ZERO carbon neutrality plan. But I just wanted to let people know that this is something that's happening within our region. And really we'll be delivering regional inventories to all of our different communities so they'll be able to work more on climate action and really get that starting base at, you know, where are my emissions? You know, what are things that I need to tackle, both from an air quality perspective and a health perspective, as well as just kind of thinking towards the future. And the cool thing with this is that we'll have community summaries and guidance for future steps. So we were involved in Ann Arbor's A2ZERO carbon neutrality plan. And so we're hoping to, you know, Sean's going to talk about, you know, this air quality stuff as an outcome of that. And I think the more that we can focus, you know, looking at more of this localized level for climate planning, for air quality planning and actions, it really can benefit communities and public health as well as benefit all of our local governments. So with that, that's kind of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions and thanks for letting me talk so much at you on a Wednesday night about air quality.
Great, thank you so much, Katie. We've got lots of great questions coming in. I think we'll save most of them for the end. We'll have a big Q&A session, but we do have one that's, I think, pretty specific to your presentation, so I'll go ahead and ask that quickly. So is SEMCOG the MPO in this area, or do you have a relationship with the MPO for mobility planning?
Yes, SEMCOG is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for our region. So we do all of this work and more.
Great, thank you. Erica, I just wanted to check in with you if you've got that website up and running, if you wanted to show us that really quick.
I did get it
Awesome.
to work. Let's see. Oh, okay. Here we go. So this is the DEQ My Air website. We used to be DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. Now we're EGLE. But this site is what is connected to the Air Quality Index site that I showed before. And you can go to air quality notifications to sign up for EnviroFlash, which you can get information to sign up for when there's high ozone action days in SEMCOG region or throughout the state or country. You can pick which area you want. Or for the monitoring data, up here, you have by day, and this is our Allen Park site. And this is the ozone data for that site today. This information is, I can't remember if this monitor does minute data or 5-minute data, but it's either minute or 5-minute data, and that is average to create the hourly data that is recorded on this site and then reported to EPA as part of our air quality reporting. And so all of these parameters, ozone, PM2.5, carbon monoxide, SO2, NOI, that's a type of nitrogen oxides, temperature, wind direction, wind speed. You can see which ones are recorded continuously at each site, and there's a drop-down box at the bottom. Pick your site and go.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, I think we will take a brief break. So I'm showing 6:57, so we'll come back around 7:02-ish, so give everyone a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back on for my presentation and then the Q&A session to follow that. So thank you both again for the presentations, and I will see everyone in 5 minutes. All right, well, welcome back from the break, everyone. Hopefully everyone had the chance to do whatever they need to do, stretch their legs at least. I will go ahead and start sharing my screen and get into my presentation. I guess technically I'll introduce myself as well. I already kind of did, but my name is Sean Reynolds. I am a Community Sustainability Coordinator here with the Office of Sustainability and Innovations in Ann Arbor. Which basically just means that I am in charge of various different programs that relate to our sustainability and the A2ZERO plan. And one of those is that I am in charge of getting our air quality monitoring up and running. So that is what I'm going to be talking about a little bit tonight, is what Ann Arbor is going to be doing as far as air quality monitoring. So just as a little bit of background, I'm sure everyone here has at least heard of the A2ZERO plan since you're at one of our events. It is our carbon neutrality plan to achieve community-wide carbon neutrality by 2030. It is broken up into several different strategies. One of those, strategy number 6, is to enhance the resilience of our people and our place. And action 6 under strategy 6 is to implement sensors to monitor heat, air quality, waterways, and flooding. This action specifically calls out collecting data and using sensors to proactively understand risks and mitigate vulnerabilities. So we, in order to know and protect ourselves when there are air quality events that might be causing negative health impacts, we need to know that they're happening in the first place, which means that we need to have sensors to register when those are happening. It also calls out having real-time information in order to protect the public from acute and chronic disruptions. So this isn't just one-time events, but it is also looking at if there are chronic air quality issues in any part of the city that we need to be addressing and trying to reverse. So what does the monitoring look like currently in Ann Arbor? Well, as we saw earlier, there is no publicly owned air quality monitoring in Ann Arbor. So the state, the region, the city doesn't have anything going as of right now. There is some data that you can get online. If you go to Purple Air, this is a really great place to get cheap, relatively inexpensive, and easy to use air monitors that you can put up on your own in your yard or at your business or whatever. Purple Air, it measures particulate matter, which we've already discussed tonight, and then also gives an AQI, which is air quality index. That is kind of a rough estimate of what the air quality looks like in terms of all of those different criteria pollutants combined into one measurement. But it does not provide individual data on those criteria pollutants or anything else. It's just individual data on particulate matter and then that AQI, which lumps everything else together. So this data is available. There are some sensors, as you can see from this map here, that are set up in Ann Arbor. But there's really nothing publicly owned and nothing to give us a greater detail on these other pollutants beyond PM. So why do we want to monitor the air here in Ann Arbor? We are proposing to put up a suite of air quality monitors across the city that are going to provide real-time air quality data. That real-time data is going to allow us to, as was mentioned in the A2ZERO plan, proactively manage acute and chronic air quality events. So we know when these are happening, if we have long-term ones, and we can start to do things about that. It's also going to help us supplement our greenhouse gas inventory. As Katie mentioned, the city has done a greenhouse gas inventory that SIA actually has kind of spearheaded. And so we have data on the greenhouse gas emissions that are happening here in the city, but we don't have anything that's actually directly measuring necessarily carbon dioxide that is in our air. So we wanted to be able to get air quality monitors that would actually measure carbon dioxide and other sources of carbon emissions. So we could use that to help supplement what we already have in terms of our greenhouse gas inventory. It's also going to allow the Office of Sustainability and Innovations to track air quality changes in relation to the implementation of our various A2ZERO strategies. So we'll talk a little bit later about where we're putting these monitors, but one of them is going in at in the Bryant neighborhood. That is a neighborhood where we are doing a large-scale decarbonization efforts. We're trying to make that the first completely carbon neutral neighborhood in the country. So we're putting in a lot of different things going into that, but we want to see if those things that we're doing to help decarbonize, electrify, et cetera, that community are causing any sort of improvement or possibly decrease in air quality in that neighborhood. And then also things like putting in bike lanes, putting in better walking infrastructure, putting in more EV chargers so we get more EVs in the city, seeing if these sorts of things, obviously we can maybe not directly relate some of these things to changes in air quality, but we can see if there are changes that might reflect those efforts. This data is also going to be accessible for use in research. That'll be for city staff like OSI or other city groups, but also for external groups. So University of Michigan students and professors will be able to access it. AAPS students will be able to access it. Anybody can get to this data once we start getting it up and running and use it for their research. And then also just it will be publicly accessible even if you're not interested in doing research with it, you'll be able to go and look at what the air quality is, see this data, and know when there are health threats related to air quality. So we really want to make sure that everyone is able to access this data and see when there are air quality issues. So what are we going to be monitoring? We are installing solar-powered monitors that are produced by a company called AQ Mesh. We got them because they are solar powered and they transmit their data through cellular networks. So there is no wiring necessary. So they're really easy to install pretty much anywhere. I will say that as a caveat that the data that we will be getting through these will not be reference data. So what that means is that it's not going to be data that can technically be used to show that we're meeting EPA standards. So EPA standards are very strict. They're down to, very limited or very specific numbers. So the monitoring stations that, for example, EGLE has set up that we saw Erica talking about earlier, those provide reference data that is down to that EPA standard. These monitoring units, you can see that this is the size of it. It is very small and it is measuring lots of things. So obviously it's not going to be as accurate as these reference stations that you need to for the EPA certified data. But they're accurate enough to give us an idea of what is going on. And we did also, these first two that we have purchased, we actually have them currently. We're getting ready to set those up. We had them out at the Allen Park site that is operated by EGLE for a couple of weeks so that we could get data from them that we can compare directly to the data from that EGLE reference station and see just how accurate these monitors are doing. But they are going to be measuring particulate matter that is PM 2.5 and 10, as Erica was talking about earlier. And then the criteria pollutants of carbon monoxide, the nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, and then we also added in carbon dioxide, as I mentioned earlier. We want to see if we can help to supplement our greenhouse gas emissions data by measuring the carbon dioxide through these. And then they're also measuring temperature, relative humidity, and atmospheric pressure. So we also want to know heat. That was part of what we wanted to monitor in the A2ZERO plan. It specifically called out heat in addition to air quality and water quality. So we want to know what temperatures are. Obviously, being in a city, you may have noticed it can be a little bit hotter in the city than in the surrounding area. That's something called the urban heat island effect. Essentially, the asphalt, the concrete, the glass, all of the built infrastructure in a city absorbs that solar radiation and holds it a lot better than the greenery that is in open fields or forests or things of that sort. And so cities can be a few degrees warmer than the surrounding area. So here in the city, we are concerned about heat waves in the summer months, and we want to be able to monitor the temperature in the city, across the city, and know when different areas of the city might be experiencing heat waves that are going to be dangerous to human health, so that we can let folks know about that. So where are we going to be monitoring? Well, we have two right now that I mentioned that we have gotten out by that reference station in Allen Park. We're going to be putting them up soon. The first one of those is going to be going in at the Ann Arbor Farmers Market. This is an area that has a lot of pedestrian traffic for the farmers market and for the other businesses that are in that area, but it also has a lot of vehicular traffic because it is in the downtown part of Ann Arbor. So we wanted to have an air quality monitor set up there so that we can get an idea of if there are air quality events being caused by heavy vehicular traffic that might be giving or causing negative health effects to the pedestrians that are in that area. The second one, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be going in at Bryant Community Center. Again, this is a neighborhood where we're focusing a lot of our decarbonization efforts. We want to see if if the air quality is affected in any way by those efforts that we're doing down in the area. And then also Bryant Community Center, or Bryant neighborhood, is very close to the interstate. So there's the potential for a lot of air quality issues due to that. We are currently in the process of purchasing 2 more of these units. So they're going to be shipped to us soon, hopefully, and then we'll get those referenced and set up as well. Those 2, we're looking at putting one in on Main Street at the intersection with Washington. Again, this is in the downtown area, lots of vehicular traffic. But the other thing is that Main Street in this area is closed to vehicular traffic during the summer months sometimes, and also for various events throughout the year. So we wanted to be able to see if there are noticeable changes in air quality when the street is closed off and it's just pedestrian traffic and there's no cars or other vehicles on the road. See if there's any difference there. And then the fourth one we're looking to put in at Dickin Elementary School. We want to have one at one of the AAPS sites so that we can get an idea of the impacts of idling in terms of folks waiting in a line to pick up their children from the school at the end of the day, or drop them off at the end of the morning. Typically, it's worse at the end of the day when waiting to pick them up, but there are long lines of cars waiting at most of the schools to do that, and there's a lot of idling going on. So we want to see the impacts of that. The other reason we're looking at Dickon Elementary in particular, it is in a neighborhood that demographic data we've pulled. There are a lot of folks that are at high risk to air pollutants. So there are a lot of children under 18 in this neighborhood. There are a lot of adults over 65 in this neighborhood. And there's also a lot of folks that have pre-existing conditions, such as asthma, for example, that would make having air quality issues particularly bad for them. So this is a neighborhood that we really want to be focusing on for monitoring for that reason. And then once those 4 go in, we are looking at next fiscal year purchasing additional units that will hopefully be going in at other sites across the city. We really want to get an array across the entire city so we can have an idea of the air quality in the whole area. So just want to talk a little bit about data access. As I mentioned, all of the data that we get is going to be publicly accessible at some point. It probably won't be immediately after we get them up and running, because we'll have to get all the data together and get together a website to allow access to it. Part of what we're looking at is putting together some sort of interactive map that will actually show real-time and historic data, kind of like what Erica was showing with what EGLE has for their air monitors. We want to put in some sort of interactive GIS map that'll allow you to really visualize what the air quality is across the city and what it has been going back to whenever we get these online. We also want the data to be available for folks to access via a CSV file or other machine readable format. Again, we want folks to be able to do research with this data if they want to. And so we want to have it available to download the full data set so that they have all of the information that we have. So if you're interested in seeing what comes of this, then you can keep an eye on our website at a2gov.org/sustainability. From there, you can navigate to sustainability and natural resources. And then from there, you can navigate to the air page. And that's where we're going to have updates about this. We'll probably end up having a short URL, so you don't have to do all that navigating at some point. But we want to know exactly what the website's going to look like before we get to that point. So for now, I just keep an eye on that sustainability, natural resources, and then air page. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for coming and for listening to our talks. I will stop sharing my screen now, and then I think we can launch into the Q&A session with everyone. So Thea, I see you're on. Do you want to monitor the Q&A session? Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, do you want me to give you guys some questions? One of the common things we've seen is transportation emissions. So I'm going to combine a few into a thread of questions that I've seen come out. One is a question on where do transportation air quality pollutants come from? For example, is it from tire friction or something else? And what's the source that we're addressing?
Who wants to do that one? I'll start, then Katie, you can chime in. The majority of vehicle emissions come from just burning of gasoline and tailpipe emissions. There are, I mean, I did see that about the tire friction and dust pollution. Some, yes, you can kick up dust particles, and yes, tires do degrade over time, but the majority is from tailpipe emissions.
Thanks so much. Or Katie, do you have something to add? Or?
Nope, that's great. That's what I was going to say.
And then a follow-on question is, what can we and what are we doing to address that transportation-based emissions? We have some suggestions in the questions on what are we doing to bring cars up to spec? What are we doing on getting old cars off the road? What are we doing on planting trees to help filter pollutants? I think this is like a really broad question, but what can we do and what are we doing right now?
Maybe I'll go ahead and start this one because I was looking through the questions as well, and there's a lot of things that we can do. So like I kind of talked about, and I can even share a link, looking at things like road projects and congestion are a good way to, if we're just thinking about like gasoline driving cars and people getting from A to B, making sure that they can get there as efficiently as possible is one way to reduce emissions. The other thing I would say is that there is, a growing demand for things like electric vehicles. And so, one of the things that SEMCOG at least does is we have an electric vehicle toolkit that helps local governments prepare for, installing electric vehicles. And that's another way in which, we can reduce emissions. But there's also obviously a lot of equity challenges that come with that, and folks not being able to purchase those. There's also things like making sure that public transportation is funded, so not as many people are driving individual cars all the time, or making sure that you're carpooling or walking and biking when you can. So there's a lot of things like that. And I did see the comment about trees and air quality, and I think that's a great thing, that we also do. So making sure that we're improving, our urban tree canopy is really critical because, like somebody made a comment, trees and, natural environments like wetlands and whatnot have the ability to filter some of those pollutants. And so I actually do know there was a study with the EPA and the Ecology Center in downtown Detroit near some of the big industries. They put in, basically a line of trees at one of the schools there. And we're looking to see if that helped kind of filtered some of the pollutants that might be coming off from the Marathon Petroleum Center that was there. So that's definitely, utilizing the abilities of natural, ecosystems and using urban tree canopy and whatnot has a multitude of benefits. And so with that, I'll stop talking and let, somebody else say something.
I'll just chime in that on the state level, the governor just released the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. I think am I butchering that name? No, Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. And there is a section in there related to electrification and trying to push that more forward through the state, and energy efficiency savings in building materials and housing developments. So things like that is definitely going through on the state level as well.
Great. Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about trees because that is my area of specialty. So the 10,000 Trees Initiative is a part of our A2ZERO plan here. I run that program as well. That is an effort to get 10,000 additional trees planted on private property in the city by 2030. We just had a free tree giveaway recently, and that brought us up to almost 2,500 trees distributed in the first year and a half, which is really great. So we are really pushing getting some trees out there onto private property. We also have folks at AAPS and our park system and our urban forestry department are all working on the public trees along the right of way and in our parks and at our school sites and things of that sort. And so, yeah, we're really trying to, we're also currently taking a look at our urban tree canopy, urban forest and community management plan. Urban and community forest management plan, something like that. So we are looking at that and trying to update that. And so we are looking at planting a whole bunch of trees, which, as Katie did a great job of talking about, really do help with the pollution. I kind of actually have a follow-up question for Erica and Katie, if you don't mind. I actually came from Maryland. That's where I'm from originally. And there, every car is required to have an emissions test every 5 years, I think, something like that. So I just wanted to ask if, because I don't believe that Michigan has, I've only been here for a couple of years, but I don't believe Michigan has anything of that sort. Do you see that being a thing in the future?
Katie, do you want to do that one, or you want me to Go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay. You can chime in if I get anything wrong, because I know that you worked on this for a while. It's a good question. So Michigan did, I think it was back in the 90s, we did have a vehicle emissions testing program. And I don't truthfully know the reasons as to why it was removed. It might be it might have just happened, but I'm sure it also has something to do with ozone non-attainment. But at least like, I don't know if it will become a thing or not. It is, if we were to be designated, we were at marginal non-attainment. If we were to be bumped to moderate non-attainment, that is a requirement by EPA law that we would have to implement a vehicle emissions testing program. And because we have fallen within attainment, that will no longer be a requirement for the state. I do know, like, while there are, like, this is not to say that, you know, vehicle emissions testing programs, there's no benefits to them. I think there's lots of benefits to them. But at least for, you know, paying for testing and things like that, it's very costly and challenging for a state to implement. And we had been working with Wisconsin, looking at, you know, some of their costs and getting things kicked up and trying to make these programs available at no cost to the resident so that they were able to go get their testing. And it was upwards of like several $1 million to be able to do that. So I don't know what things look like in Erica. Maybe you have a better sense of at the state, but I think there's both positives and negatives to having a program like that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It was, the original program was tied to the ozone non-attainment area, the original ozone non-attainment area for the state. And now we have 3 ozone non-attainment area, or 4, 3 on the west side and 1 in the Detroit area. And it's based on population and what ozone level you are. So right now we're at the lowest level, trying to get redesignated. If we get redesignated, there won't be a requirement for it. If we don't get redesignated, we'll get bumped up and then there will be a requirement for it.
Cool. Thank you.
Great question, Sean. I learned a lot from that. So Sean went through some of the monitors, the types of air quality monitors that Ann Arbor is putting in, but if anyone knows of other types of monitors, we had a question of, can air quality be monitored from satellite imagery or from, you know, more air-based monitoring via balloons or something else?
I actually, balloons, I have not heard of that other than weather balloon related. Satellite imagery, there are some studies going on to try to get decent air quality data from satellite imagery, but the problem is that A, satellites don't stay in the same spot all the time, so you don't get constant data, and B, you get a column of air coming down from the satellite instead of just steady at the ground. So having to piece out what each layer of atmosphere is in reality from the satellite it's still being worked on.
Neat. And then we had another question, which is, are and how are water and air quality connected?
I might have a little bit of information about this, and anybody else feel free to jump in. So they are connected, but maybe not as it relates to some of the pollutants that we were talking about today. So like an example of how they could be connected is that like if there's like lots of sulfur and whatnot, that can lead to acidity in our lakes, rivers, and streams that can impact ecosystems. And then things like atmospheric nitrogen or nitrogen deposition can result in things like reducing in biodiversity and having an impact on aquatic life. So that's kind of one way in which those things are connected. There are certainly, you know, things like pollution can have an impact on water quality. I think we see that truthfully at larger scales, like within our oceans, as it relates to like increasing acidity within our oceans and how it's impacted there. But that's not to say that those things don't have an impact in the Great Lakes. And truthfully, I don't know you know, how that gets taken into account. I think that's part of what gets looked at as they're looking at the national ambient air quality standards, like what are the impacts to ecosystems and to things like agriculture. But I don't know if anybody else has more information.
Yeah, when EPA comes out with the national ambient air quality standards, there's a primary standard, which is the health of people. And then there's a secondary standard, which is the health of the environment. And that would take into account like deposition into waters and soil and how it would impact plants and their growth. But yeah, pollution, it can move around and get in all medias. It doesn't just because it might be an air pollutant does not mean it's going to stay in the air.
Great. Sorry, I froze there for a minute. Thanks so much. So I am excited to have more of a regional scope in this conversation. And one of the questions is looking at equity and equity at a regional level, which is if the goal is to improve air quality in Southeast Michigan, including in Ann Arbor, and we know that equity is a priority, would it make more sense for Ann Arbor to support improving air quality monitoring and actions in more affected areas, such as those near Detroit versus in Ann Arbor? And would they spill over to Ann Arbor indirectly? So I am just curious, any comments?
I'll start and then I'll let Sean pick up pieces. We have a lot of air monitoring in areas around that are heavily industrial in this state. That's not to say we couldn't use more, and it's, you know, like I said, it would be awesome to have more air monitors everywhere to get better data and be able to really pinpoint where things are coming from. But we do have a lot in Detroit and covered, especially in areas of higher concentration of industry. We, as the map, I don't know if you remember that I showed you, we're very sparsely populated in air monitors throughout the rest of the state. And the majority wind flow direction flows into Detroit and Canada most of the time, and not out from Detroit to Ann Arbor. And this is not a meteorologist speaking. Let me just put that out there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it was my understanding as well that for the most part, air quality in Ann Arbor is going to be affecting air quality in Detroit rather than the other way around. So if we are aware of what is happening in Ann Arbor, then that can actually help to give us an idea of what might be happening very soon in Detroit as the air is pushed over in that direction. Katie, I don't know if you had any other insights into that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if there's one thing I've learned from diving into air quality is that it's really complex. And like one of the ways that I like to kind of show that is if you like look on your phone and you go to the weather app, you can see what's called an air quality index, which takes different variables into consideration. And so you can see that move around during the day. So air pollution is being affected by tons of meteorological factors. So if a big storm is coming or if there's a lot of wind, like those things are all going to shift like where things are going. And so I know right now, like at least at the federal level, I think EPA is coming out with some some sort of something about like a good neighbor clause. So thinking about air quality more holistically from this perspective that, you know, we're impacting Canada's air quality, Canada's impacting our air quality around the world is impacting everybody else. So that's, you know, there's almost like this regional global system of air quality as well as at this like localized level. So I think it's important that if, you know, Ann Arbor can do more to impact Detroit to be a good neighbor, I think that's great. And there also are quite a lot of monitors that are set up in the city of Detroit through the Ecology Center that are looking at a little bit more of that fluctuating data. So that's not to say that programs aren't happening there, but it is, you know, something that's definitely good to think about.
All great answers. Thanks, everyone. Specifically, we had a question on what are some examples of the transportation projects that are funded through SEMCOG? And I will add, how can people keep track of and learn about what SEMCOG is up to, you know, outside of meetings like this?
That's a great question. Can I share my screen? I want to go ahead and do it anyways. Okay, so super great question. I wanted to pull up this interactive map that we have on our website because I did read these questions in advance. And so these are all of the TIP and RTP projects that have been funded or are going to be funded. So you can see there's like stuff all over the place, but you can take a look at what's funded in Ann Arbor. So like, let's just say, for example, I click on this one. This looks like a Norfolk Southern Railway. So this was for freight line funding. That's that example. I truthfully don't know a whole lot about that, so I can't entirely speak to it. But there's a ton of different projects. So like this one listed right here was mostly designated for safety, and so, you know, putting in rumble strips and markings and things like that for the safety. And so you can look at this map and click through. Some of these are like really large projects. So I live in Ferndale, and there's this whole I-75 project happening right now to widen the lanes as well as put in stormwater infrastructure. And so that's all going on right now. That's an example of a project. So we do fund some of these projects, but we also just make a note of all of the projects happening in our region. And so that's kind of what this does. And then if you're curious about that CMAQ, that congestion mitigation and air quality work that we do, these are a list of some of the projects that were funded from 2021. And so these are things like signal optimization to make sure that, you know, we're not having idling, people aren't stopping at every light along the way, like I somehow managed to do when I drive my car. Things like education on, you know, ozone action, putting in turn lanes. I know there's also stuff in here that talks about safety. So there's a lot of different projects that we fund at SEMCOG, and those are just some examples. And we do have a website. You can always sign up. We have something called Regional Update, and I can try and provide someone with the link that they can send out after this. We also have an environmental newsletter that I work on every month or every other month about that talks about all of our environmental work that we do. But those are two good ways to stay in touch with us on the projects that we're working on, because we do work on a whole variety of topics, whether that be, you know, whether that be legislation, whether that be environmental work, whether those things tie together. There's a whole variety of things, but that's a good way to stay up to date with us. And always feel free to reach out and contact me if you have any questions or are curious. I know we work a lot with local governments, but we also do a lot of work with education for local residents. So always happy to talk about that.
That is so cool, and I love a good map. So I love seeing that.
Dave, I'm a data person myself, so I'm like, whenever you get a good like GIS or story map going, I'm like, this is great.
It's great. This next question is for Sean. We had a question on another elementary school in Ann Arbor, Wines, which is, they also say, has long lines of idling. You know, there's a highway right next door. There's also retirees in the neighborhood. How is Dickens Elementary in particular selected? I know you mentioned some of the characteristics. And then also, like, what's the future for other sites for monitoring in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, great question. So when we were looking at where to put the next couple of monitors that we got, we knew that we wanted to do an AAPS site because of the idling that happens as folks are waiting. As far as I'm aware, this happens at every single one of our schools. So really any of the schools, we would be getting good data on that idling thing. And whatever we get at one school will most likely apply to another school. So if we're seeing that it really is affecting air quality negatively at Dickon, for example, then that's a pretty sure bet that it's also doing it at Wines or at any of the other schools. As far as why Dickon in particular was chosen, like I mentioned, we were looking at the demographic data, and we have a whole bunch of different sources for that, but we saw that there were a lot of populations that are going to be more at risk of health impacts from air quality issues are in that neighborhood. And so we figured that would be a great neighborhood to really kick off the school monitoring. But as far as in the future, I think we definitely want to include a few other AAPS sites in there. Those are really great sites to get an air quality monitor in. We can work with AAPS really easily on that. And also again with the idling. But then there are also other options. Like I said, since these don't really have any wires going to them, they can go in pretty much anywhere. So we have a lot of options for where you can put these, but we want to try and get them across the entire city. So.
That's very cool, and I'm excited to see what we learn and quantify from that. And then this last question we have, I think, is for Erica. What entities benefit when an area gets designated as having reached attainment or non-attainment? And then a note on the pandemic probably affected air quality because we saw much less car transportation going on. So would the data from the last 2 years be valid? And then would industries prefer to be designated having reached attainment, even if the last 2 years might not be average quality?
Okay, I love multi-part questions. Okay, so what entities benefit? I'm just looking at the question here. So I think everybody benefits at this point, because if the area is designated, I'm just talking about ozone right now. The Southeast Michigan area is designated for marginal non-attainment, which means that industries that want to get permits have to offset their pollution by a little bit in order to get a permit. So they're actually producing less pollution than they would have been if we were in attainment. Other than that, there are a few, there's not very many hardcore requirements. Once we get bumped up to a higher level of non-attainment, then industry has to offset their pollutants by more to get a permit, but everybody has to do vehicle inspection and maintenance on their vehicles, which is costly to not only the state to run, but people to do individually. In getting into attainment means that our air quality has been better, means that our air quality has improved, which is a good thing. We want our air quality to improve. We don't want to continue down a path of having more and more regulations when we have better air quality. So I think it's everybody benefits by being in attainment rather than being in non-attainment. The second part, the pandemic, would the data be valid? Yes, the data is valid. We do audits on the machines. The operators check the machines every couple of weeks. We validate the data internally multiple times before it is submitted to EPA. In fact, that site that I showed you with the real-time data, that is the unvalidated data. So it is subject to change before it is submitted to EPA as valid data. Now, did the pandemic have an impact on the data? We actually didn't see an impact, which was kind of odd. We were expecting to see one, but I don't know if it was the meteorology or what, but the ozone levels were fairly high last year. And I think I answered all of that question. Would industries prefer designation? Yeah, I'm assuming industries would prefer to be in attainment because they don't have to offset as much pollution, but again, not having bad air is better.
Thanks so much. So that was our last submitted question in Q&A. We do have a hand raised, which might be a follow-on to one of our questions. So Dave, I'm going to allow you to talk.
So I unmuted. Thanks for your great presentations. I just want to ask, is it still considered a rule of thumb or something like that, that any, on average, location in continental United States has a air quality index level? And then is it still considered true that about half of the pollutant load is from regional air as opposed to locally produced pollutants, and then half local on average across, you know, just the general experience across the United States? And then the question is, we had a big year in wildfires all up and down the western half of the North American continent. What about that? And just the other thing that kind of bugged me was, doesn't Michigan have a whole business about what fish we're allowed to or recommended to eat or not eat? And isn't that from air pollution, getting heavy metal contamination into the waters and ecosystems from burning coal for producing electricity, and back in the old pre-catalytic converter leaded gasoline days? Isn't the relationship between air pollution and water pollution really evident in our Great Lakes and all our local inland lakes and stuff? There's so much health warnings about the, now we have the PFAS. To whatever you want to respond to. Thanks. And now I have to unmute or mute. I've never done this before. Mute.
Dave, I wasn't quite sure. It sounds like you're still kind of wondering about the relationship between air pollutants and water. Is that? Well, I'll just give an example of something that occurred over the last probably 15 years. We started monitoring, getting high levels of mercury at our air monitors, and we ended up doing some special studies to monitor mercury. It resulted in putting more controls on certain industries, including some of the power plants, and the one that's coming to mind, oh, I'm gonna, can't remember the name of it right now, but Monroe. There's one in Monroe that ended up having to put controls on to reduce their mercury output, and some others had to change what they were burning, what type of coal. So they were burning cleaner pollutants, or so the pollutants that were being produced were cleaner and there were less of them, which did end up resulting in a huge drop in mercury along with some other pollutants in the atmosphere. And that is my cat, sorry. And I'm not sure about the mercury levels in the Great Lakes, whether they, like, what the status of those are. I'm sorry. I could probably find someone in our water division to get back with you if you want. If you want to give me you can contact me and I can hook you up with someone from our water division.
I do know one of the things you mentioned was PFAS. So I think when we think about water contamination, there's a lot of different areas where it can come from. Some of that can be what we call non-point source runoff. And so that's like a good example of that is just like if you put fertilizer on your yard, that fertilizer is eventually going to make its way back into a water body, especially if you live in what's called a separated sewer system, which is where runoff from ditches or runoff might go through ditches into a local water body, or it might go through a series of pipes that go into a local water body, but it's not filtered before then. So, you know, that's just one way in which we have things like water contamination. There's also things like point source pollution, which would be, you know, things like you know, like an industry that might be dumping, you know, there's a lot of different things. I can't remember right now if agriculture falls under non-point source or point source, so I'm sorry about that. But agriculture is another example. But at least when you're talking about PFAS, especially when that happened in Ann Arbor, that was largely the result of an industry that was on the Huron River who was producing PFAS chemicals, and their wastewater was running off into the Huron River. And so that's why we see PFAS levels. So I guess to kind of answer your question, it's not always, you know, air quality that relates to it. That can certainly be a piece of the puzzle, but there's also a lot of different ways in which we experience, you know, water contamination. And yeah, I'm sure there's somebody at the state that can talk your ear off about this as well. So I'm sure Erica could put you in contact with them.
Thanks. I took notes on a few other questions that were asked because there were a lot, so I'm trying to keep track of them. One is a question on for air pollution that we experience here. There's this rule of thumb that half of it's from local sources and half of it's from regional sources. I think there's a comment on wildfires across the US that I'm sure we saw the impacts here. What's it just to look like in general?
So the wildfires do sometimes impact our air monitors. There is a regional group of the meteorologists in the Lake Michigan state region that get together and discuss whether or not issues from wildfires are impacting high particulate matter levels or not, and whether or not we should flag that data to possibly exclude from like either particulate matter or ozone issues further down the line. We didn't end up excluding any values last year, even though we were pretty sure there were some that were impacted by wildfires, if I'm remembering correctly on that, Katie. Or Kate, please, yeah. And as far as out of the region / out of state impacts on air monitoring emissions, yes, there are, which is why, I mean, air quality is complex. Air doesn't stay in a bubble right above your head. It flows from one area to the other. And again, you can see that on any weather map when you're looking at radar that's going through. And I don't know the percentage offhand. I'm sure the percentage changes based on the day.
All great questions. So that's all I have for the questions that we've received. And I think Dave, we hit them all, but if not, I hope you can follow up to get your questions answered. But I will hand it back over to you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Thea. One last thing that I just wanted to touch on briefly is indoor air quality. I know we've been talking a lot about outdoor air quality, but indoor air quality is a major issue as well. That is a little less complex maybe because the air inside your house does stay put a little bit more than the air outside. There are a lot of sources of indoor air pollution, but most of them all come from things like gas burning stoves and gas burning furnaces. So that is another benefit of electrification, is removing those sources of air pollution from your home. We do have, there are a lot of air quality monitors available out there that are very small portable ones that again, they're the smaller and more portable you get, generally the less accurate the data is, but a lot of them are still really great to get a general idea of what air pollution is. I know we have an intern on our team who bought one and was using it on his daily bike ride commute into University of Michigan and did a project on that looking at how air quality changed on his commute, but also has it indoors and told us one day that he was really glad that he had it because the vent duct on his dryer, his clothes dryer, had actually come attached in some way, and so there were gases leaking into the home from the dryer that was running because it wasn't venting out properly, and having that air quality monitor there, he actually was able to see that that was happening and notice it and was able to remedy the situation before anyone was harmed. So just wanted to briefly touch on indoor air quality and highly recommend that everyone get some sort of indoor air quality monitor that you can have in your home to alert you to things of that sort. Katie, Erica, I don't know if you have any insights on indoor air quality, but just wanted to bring it up.
It's my reason for having lots of plants in my house. That's about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I saw something. I actually have a snake plant. And so this comment, I saw a comment, something somewhere the other day. I don't know if it's true or not, but the snake plants can, if you had like 3 snake plants in a room that was completely sealed off, they would be able to produce enough oxygen for a human to live for like a week or something like that. So yeah, plants are amazing. All right. Well, other than that, I think that's all we had to talk about tonight. So I just want to thank Erica and Katie again for speaking tonight and for answering all of our questions. I want to thank Thea for being here to facilitate our Q&A session. And then wanted to remind all of you that this will be posted online if on our YouTube channel if you want to rewatch it. I will also be sending out an email with that link to that recording and also with the slide decks that were in the presentation tonight, so you can take a look at those. And then just remind everyone that coming up next month on the 25th, we are having our final A2ZERO Sustainability Series seminar. And that one is on A2ZERO and me. So we'll be talking about the A2ZERO plan and how you can get involved as a resident of Ann Arbor. So with that, I think we will call it a night and give everyone 2 minutes back in their day. Thanks, everyone.